Boston winters have always been unforgiving, but this year felt colder than ever. The biting wind from Massachusetts Bay rattled my apartment windows as I sat hunched over my drafting table, working on yet another project that demanded perfection. My name is Mary Williams, and I've spent years building a reputation as one of Boston's most sought-after architects. But behind the accolades lies a life teetering on the edge. Just last month, I collapsed at work, a silent wake-up call that my body was screaming for rest. Yet, I buried the incident deep inside me, unwilling to let anyone know, especially not my family. They've always seen me as cold, distant, and obsessed with work. Admitting weakness would only confirm their worst assumptions about me. The pressure weighed heavily on my chest, deadlines looming, expectations mounting, but it wasn't just my career haunting me. It was the unspoken tension with my family, the constant feeling that no matter how hard I tried, I could never measure up. Every phone call home ended in judgment, every visit laced with subtle jabs about my lack of balance. What they didn't see were the late nights, the sacrifices, the pieces of myself I left behind to hold everything together. And now, as my sister Ashley prepared for her picture-perfect wedding, I knew the storm brewing within our family was about to break, and I had no idea if I'd survive it intact. Growing up in a modest household in Boston's Dorchester neighborhood, I learned early on that life wasn't fair, and neither was my family. While Ashley basked in the spotlight of our parents' affection, I carried the weight of responsibility on my shoulders. At just 16, I juggled late-night shifts at fast food chains and weekends spent cleaning office buildings to help keep the lights on at home. My hands were calloused from scrubbing floors, but it didn't matter. Every penny I earned went toward groceries or Ashley's tuition for her prestigious prep school. Meanwhile, she breezed through high school, attending proms and cheerleading practices while I worked myself to exhaustion. When college applications rolled around, Ashley was handed a golden ticket, a full scholarship to Harvard University, courtesy of my parents' relentless financial sacrifices. For me, there was no such luxury. I pieced together loans, grants, and part-time jobs to attend Northeastern University. Every acceptance letter felt like both a triumph and a burden, knowing I'd have to fight twice as hard to prove myself, not only to the world, but also to my own family. Yet, despite all my efforts, they never saw me as more than the workaholic daughter. The day I won the prestigious Young Architect Award should have been one of the proudest moments of my life. It was recognition not just of my talent, but of years of sacrifice, sleepless nights, and sheer determination. I remember holding the engraved plaque in my trembling hands, imagining how proud my parents would be when they saw what their cold daughter had achieved. But the phone call I made that evening shattered any hope I had left. "We're sorry, Mary," my mother said curtly, "but your father has an important meeting tomorrow morning, and we can't make it." Even Ashley texted me later with a half-hearted congratulations, adding, "Maybe next time you can find a way to balance work and family better." That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the awards sitting on my coffee table. The room felt suffocating, the silence deafening. How could they dismiss something so monumental so easily? Their indifference cut deeper than any criticism ever could. It wasn't just about the award. It was the culmination of years of being overlooked, undervalued, and dismissed. And now, as Ashley prepared for her wedding, the ultimate celebration of her perfect life, I couldn't shake the feeling that this event would only widen the chasm between us. Would they even notice if I disappeared entirely? The weeks leading up to Ashley's wedding were a blur of tension and unspoken resentment. As I flipped through the guest list my mother had sent me, one glaring detail caught my eye. Nearly all of my colleagues from work were invited, yet their names appeared clustered together under a single table assignment. Table 12, tucked away in the farthest corner of the banquet hall. It was as if they'd been deliberately hidden, an afterthought rather than honored guests. When I confronted my parents about it over the phone, their response chilled me to the bone. "We don't want to draw too much attention to people who aren't closely related," my father said dismissively, his tone dripping with indifference. His words hung heavy in the air, confirming what I'd always feared. They didn't see me or my accomplishments as worthy of celebration. But that wasn't the worst of it. Days before the wedding, whispers began to spread like wildfire among our extended family and friends. Ashley, fueled by jealousy and insecurity, had started a vicious rumor. Jason Harrison, her fiancé, hadn't just met her at a mutual friend's party. He had known me first. Worse still, she claimed I still harbored feelings for him and was secretly plotting to sabotage their relationship. The lie spread faster than I could contain it, poisoning the atmosphere even before the ceremony began. By the time I arrived at the venue, a sprawling estate in Newport, Rhode Island, I could feel the weight of judgmental stares burning into me. When I entered the grand hall, the scene unfolded like something out of a nightmare. My colleagues sat huddled at table 12, exchanging awkward glances as servers whisked past them without so much as a second look. Meanwhile, Ashley floated gracefully through the crowd, radiant in her ivory gown, while Jason stood dutifully by her side, oblivious to the chaos brewing beneath the surface. Every laugh, every toast, seemed laced with veiled jabs aimed at me. One distant aunt leaned toward another during the appetizer course and loudly remarked, "Poor Ashley. She has no idea how manipulative some people can be." Her gaze flickered briefly in my direction, sharp and accusing. I tried to hold my composure, but the isolation was suffocating. No one approached me, not even old acquaintances who might have once called themselves friends. Even my own parents avoided making eye contact, choosing instead to hover protectively around Ashley, as though shielding her from my supposed toxicity. The irony stung. Here I was, accused of betrayal when I hadn't even spoken more than a handful of words to Jason since college. Yet, the damage was done. The seeds of doubt Ashley planted had taken root, twisting reality into a narrative where I was the villain. As the evening wore on, the tension reached a breaking point. During a lull in the festivities, I spotted Eleanor, Jason's younger sister, lingering near the bar. She gave me a sympathetic smile, which only made the lump in my throat grow larger. "Don't let them get to you," she murmured softly as she passed by. But her kindness only underscored how alone I truly felt. Surrounded by hundreds of people, I had never felt more invisible or more betrayed. This wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was a battleground, and I was losing. The tension in the ballroom was palpable, like a storm ready to break. As Mary sat alone at her isolated table, sipping ginger ale and trying to steady her racing thoughts, she couldn't shake the feeling that something explosive was about to happen. Her suspicions were confirmed when Mike, the same man who had earlier acted so strangely, stumbled back into the room, his face flushed and his tie loosened. He wasn't just drunk. He was unraveling secrets faster than anyone could contain them. "You know what?" Mike slurred loudly, pointing an unsteady finger toward Jason. "Your fiancé here?" "Yeah, he used to be obsessed with Mary back in college. But she turned him down because of her family responsibilities." The words hit the air like a grenade, silencing every conversation in the room. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Mary's heart pounded as all eyes turned toward her, their gazes sharp with accusation and disbelief. Before she could respond, Jason stepped forward, his face pale but determined. "It's true," he admitted, his voice trembling. "I did have feelings for Mary in college, but it ended there. She made it clear nothing could happen because of her commitments." His confession only deepened the chaos. Ashley, standing beside him, looked as though the ground beneath her feet had crumbled. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table, her carefully constructed facade cracking under the weight of betrayal. "You knew?" Ashley screamed, whirling on Jason. "And you didn't tell me?" Her voice cracked, raw with pain and fury. Then, without missing a beat, she rounded on Mary, her expression twisted with venom. "This is your fault," she shouted, loud enough for the entire hall to hear. "You've always tried to ruin my happiness. First, you abandoned this family, and now you're trying to steal my fiancé too." Silence fell over the banquet hall, thick and suffocating. Even the servers froze mid-step, unsure how to react to the spectacle unfolding before them. Mary stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. Every eye in the room was trained on her, waiting for her response. But before she could speak, Eleanor, Jason's sister, intervened. "Ashley, stop," she said firmly, stepping between the two women. "Mary hasn't done anything wrong. In fact, everything we've heard tonight proves how much she sacrificed for this family. You're the one spreading lies out of jealousy." But Ashley wasn't listening. Tears streamed down her face as she lashed out again. "No, she ruined everything. My whole life. I've lived in her shadow, trying to measure up to her perfection. And now she's ruining my wedding too. With that, Ashley collapsed into sobs, leaving the room in stunned silence. Guests began whispering nervously, some gathering their belongings to leave early. The celebration that was meant to unite two families had devolved into a battleground. Mary felt the weight of it all pressing down on her chest. She wanted to defend herself, to explain the truth, but the damage was already done. The lies Ashley had spun had taken root, poisoning not just the atmosphere of the wedding but years of strained relationships within their family. As Jason tried to comfort a hysterically crying Ashley, Mary realized the full extent of the rift between them. This wasn't just about jealousy or insecurity. It was about years of resentment boiling over, culminating in a public spectacle that left everyone reeling. The tension at the reception had reached a breaking point. Mary sat silently at her isolated table, surrounded by strangers who exchanged awkward glances but avoided speaking to her directly. The weight of the lies Ashley had spread hung heavy in the air, poisoning every interaction. Guests whispered behind their hands, their eyes darting toward her like she was some kind of pariah. Even the servers seemed hesitant to approach her table, leaving it conspicuously empty while others enjoyed second helpings of dessert. Every smile, every laugh around her felt like a dagger twisting deeper into her heart. It was during the toast speeches that the situation exploded. As Jason's best man raised his glass to honor the newlyweds, Mike, visibly drunk and unsteady on his feet, interrupted loudly. "Wait, wait," he slurred, stumbling toward the microphone. "There's something you all need to know about Mary." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to him with a mix of curiosity and dread. "She didn't just work hard for herself," Mike continued, his voice wavering. "She supported her family too, paid for Ashley's tuition, helped with medical bills, everything." Before Mary could process what was happening, Jason stepped forward, panic etched across his face. "Mike, stop," he pleaded, but it was too late. Mike pressed on, revealing fragments of the past. How Jason had once been infatuated with Mary in college, only for her to reject him because of her responsibilities. And now Ashley's lying about all of this. Mike shouted, pointing accusingly at Ashley. Chaos erupted. Ashley lunged at Mary, screaming accusations, her perfectly styled hair falling loose as she struggled against the security guards who rushed in to separate them. In the midst of the pandemonium, Mary stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the marble floor. Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. "I don't need anyone's forgiveness," she declared, her tone steady despite the storm raging inside her. "But I will not let the truth be twisted any longer." The room froze, every guest stunned into silence. Without another word, Mary turned and walked out, her emerald gown trailing behind her like a queen abandoning her throne. Outside, the cold Boston night air hit her like a slap, but it did little to calm the fire burning within her. Just as she reached the curb, her phone buzzed incessantly. It was Eleanor, Jason's sister. "Mary, you need to hear this," Eleanor said urgently. Through the call, Mary learned the full extent of the chaos unfolding back at the venue. Mike's drunken confession had forced Jason to admit the truth. He had indeed loved Mary in college but respected her decision to focus on her family. Ashley's lies had unraveled completely, leaving both families in turmoil. As Eleanor spoke, Mary realized the magnitude of what had happened. Her sacrifices, long ignored and dismissed, were finally coming to light. But instead of feeling vindicated, she felt hollow. The damage was done, and no amount of truth could undo the years of pain and misunderstanding. Still, as she stared up at the star-filled sky, Mary knew one thing for certain. The truth, no matter how painful, was the first step toward healing. The morning after the wedding, Mary sat alone in her hotel room, staring at the blinking cursor on her laptop screen. Her hands trembled as she began typing, a letter that would reveal every truth she had buried for years. She poured her heart into it, detailing how she had sacrificed her dreams to support the family, while Ashley lived comfortably under their parents' protection. Attached were bank statements showing monthly transfers to her parents' account, receipts for Ashley's tuition payments, and even records of medical bills she had quietly settled when her parents fell ill. "I never asked for recognition," Mary wrote, her voice breaking as tears blurred her vision. "But I deserve honesty." When the email finally landed in her family's inboxes, The response was immediate and devastatingly dismissive. Her father called first, his tone sharp with disbelief. "Mary, is this some kind of joke? Are you trying to ruin everything now?" His words cut deep, but Mary remained calm. "Dad, check the documents. It's all true." Hours later, another call came, this time from her mother, Judith. "We went through the files," she admitted hesitantly. "It's unbelievable. You've been sending money home every month, even during those times when you said you couldn't afford visits." The silence that followed was heavy with guilt. Meanwhile, chaos erupted within the family. Ashley, overwhelmed by shame and fear, spiraled into despair. Late one night, Mary received a frantic call from her father. Ashley tried to take her own life. He choked out, his voice trembling. "She's in the hospital now." Mary froze, her stomach dropping like lead. Despite everything, Ashley was still her sister, and hearing about her desperation shook Mary to her core. She rushed to the hospital, where doctors assured them Ashley would recover physically, though emotionally, she was fragile. In the days that followed, the family gathered around Ashley's bedside, forced to confront the consequences of their actions. Mary watched as her parents' faces crumpled under the weight of realization. "We were blind," her father whispered, gripping her hand tightly. "We thought we were protecting Ashley, but instead, we ignored your sacrifices. We let jealousy and lies tear us apart." Her mother nodded tearfully, adding, "All these years, we believed Ashley's version because it was easier than facing the truth." As Ashley slowly regained strength, she began attending therapy sessions, encouraged by both families. During one painful conversation, Ashley confessed, "I was scared that no matter what I did, I'd never measure up to you, Mary. So I lied to make myself feel better." Her voice cracked, raw with regret. "I didn't realize how much I hurt everyone." Though forgiveness didn't come easily, Mary saw glimpses of the sister she once knew, the vulnerable girl who used to look up to her. Reconciliation wasn't instantaneous. Wounds carved too deeply don't heal overnight. But small steps were taken. Her parents started acknowledging Mary's achievements, not just professionally, but personally. They apologized repeatedly, vowing to rebuild trust. Ashley, though hesitant, reached out occasionally, sending texts or leaving voicemails filled with tentative apologies. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Mary turned to her mother and said softly, "I don't expect things to go back to how they were, but maybe we can start fresh with honesty." As Mary stood on the balcony of her new apartment, gazing at Boston's skyline shimmering under the autumn moonlight, she realized something profound. Family wasn't just about blood. It was about honesty, respect, and mutual understanding. The scars from Ashley's betrayal still lingered, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they had become a reminder of how far she'd come and how much she deserved to be valued. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Rebuilding trust with Ashley felt like trying to piece together fragments of shattered glass. Every step forward carried the risk of cutting deeper. Yet, Mary saw glimmers of hope. Ashley's recent text, an apology laced with vulnerability, had been genuine, even if hesitant. And though their parents' acknowledgement of her sacrifices came late, it was sincere. For the first time in years, Mary felt seen, not as the cold workaholic, but as someone who had given everything for love and duty. Still, Mary knew she needed distance to heal fully. She had moved into this apartment not to escape her family, but to rediscover herself. As the city lights flickered below, she whispered to the night, "We're not perfect, but maybe that's okay." The journey to reconciliation might stretch over years, but it was rooted in truth. And sometimes, truth alone is enough to mend what's broken. That night, as Mary stood by the window of her apartment, her phone buzzed softly on the coffee table. The screen lit up with a message from Ashley. "Mary, I'm sorry. I didn't have the courage to meet you today, but someday, I want to have the strength to apologize properly. You were always a wonderful sister, better than I deserved." Mary stared at the words, her heart pounding with a mix of emotions. Forgiveness wasn't easy, but she felt a flicker of hope, a fragile beginning to something new. She replied simply, "Ashley, contact me when you're ready. I'll be here." Sending the message felt like releasing a weight she'd been carrying for years. The next morning, Mary began packing her belongings. Though reconciliation was slowly taking shape, She knew she needed space, not just from Ashley, but from the tangled web of expectations and misunderstandings that had defined her relationship with her family. A new apartment awaited her on the other side of Boston, a place where she could rebuild her life on her own terms. As she folded her emerald green dress, the one she'd worn to Ashley's wedding, she paused, running her fingers over the fabric. It was a symbol of everything she'd endured: betrayal, pain, and ultimately, resilience. Looking out at the city skyline, now bathed in the soft glow of dawn, Mary allowed herself to dream of the future. She imagined a life where her achievements were celebrated not just by strangers, but by those who mattered most. Her family's journey toward understanding was far from over, but for the first time, it felt possible. With a deep breath, she zipped up her suitcase and smiled, a smile tinged with both sadness and hope. The road ahead would be long, but she was ready to walk it, one step at a time.